Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things, well, not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of Chiro Health USA, the network that works for chiropractic. Today, our guest is Eric Hoffman, a risk management professional with over 13 years of experience at ChiroSecure. Eric's extensive background includes coaching numerous chiropractors and their teams on navigating risk management challenges within their practices. Not stopping there, he's also the mastermind behind Cairo Jobs, an innovative platform dedicated to revolutionizing chiropractic employment opportunities. Today, Eric will share his wealth of knowledge, offering valuable insights onto streamlining practice operations and driving growth within the chiropractic profession. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So in 13 years, I'm sure you have seen a lot. What are some of the most common risk management issues that we face as chiropractors, and what strategies have you recommended to kind of mitigate those risks?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most people would believe, and they'd be right in certain respects, that fractured ribs are the most common issue that chiropractors deal with. That is maybe the most common injury that we deal with, but the most common risk management situation that chiropractors deal with today and historically is board complaints. There's an order of magnitude amount of board complaints higher than anything else we deal with. And if you're not familiar, if you're one of the few lucky ones who haven't experienced a board complaint, all that means is either a patient or a colleague or somebody went online, went to your license, clicked the button that says file complaint, and issued a complaint against your license. The board, as some people know, by law have to investigate any complaint they receive, regardless of the merit. You can put gibberish in the complaint and they still have to investigate. And their goal is really to determine if you've violated any rule or regulation within your licensing guidelines. So they go digging, they try to find something. Remember, they're not your friend, they're the police for the profession. They're there to protect the patients, and rightfully so. But to answer your question, that is by far the most common situation we deal with. And there's no true way to avoid them other than just be a good person and a good practitioner. But at the end of the day, you can't predict some of these complaints. Some patients are just, career not criminals, but career instigators, I guess is a better way to say it, that just want to pick a fight with whoever they can.
They're just not nice people.
Exactly. Yeah, there's plenty of those out there. So unfortunately, you might get one of those on your doorstep at some point. And really, the way we deal with it, which I'm sure other malpractice carriers deal with in the same way, is we hire an attorney in your state who has vast experience communicating and handling board situations. And they, go through it on your behalf and respond to the board, respond to the allegations using your patient data or whatever else they need to, at the end of the day, get it dismissed or as close to that as possible.
Yep. One of the things I've learned along the way with working with malpractice carriers is that one of the most common complaints that we see filed is not over your clinical care. It's often related to your financial policies. Now, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I spent 13 hours in a board of examiners meeting watching this doctor who has an amazing practitioner. He's really a good doctor, but he was, doing prepay plans. And I'm not taking a position one way or the other on that, but he had his agreement written in such a fashion that if the patient dropped out of care, he would retroactively go back and bill them his actual fees versus the discounts that he was offering within that care plan. And he pissed off the wrong lady. This lady took him to the board. And during that process, Eric, it was really interesting to watch this unfold. It went from being a complaint about dollars and cents, basically, to the fact that on her intake form, she came in to see him for a weight loss thing that he was doing.
Right.
On her intake form, she had written down no neuromusculoskeletal complaints, just that she was there for weight loss.
Yeah.
Well, the complaint got filed. Guess who else was sitting in the room? A Blue Cross representative, the Attorney General's representative.
Yep.
And so by the end of this, what turned out as a patient complaint about dollars and cents, there was a Blue Cross representative that was now requesting files on all of their Blue Cross patients. Because let's face it, as a good chiropractor, you can find a subluxation, joint dysfunction on just about anybody you palpate.
Yeah.
But that was not the patient's complaint. That was not her problem. He just kind of found that in the interim. And so they, it ended up turning into a huge audit based over dollars and cents. And as I've always shared with doctors, if I can make a problem go away for $49 or $59, that's a good day.
Right.
You can be right or you can be happy, but you cannot always be both. So, choose wisely, as they say. So it's interesting to hear that your experience has pretty much been the same. A lot of them are frivolous lawsuits, but you got to take them seriously. And the most important takeaway, I think, is just don't do stupid stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you just served up a lot of juicy fruit there that we can take this in so many directions.
Oh,
I'll nail a few points because you said so many important things in that one example. So number one, if we whittle things down to a core issue, 98% of the time, these complaints, these lawsuits always result in something financial, a financial dispute of some sort. People really care about money, believe it or not. And so if you go to the core issue, it's almost always financial. So one of the really important points you made, which is what I talk to doctors every single day about, is you are making an investment into your future and into your mental health when, a patient, let's say, asks for a refund because they didn't get the care or service they expected, or even worse, they feel like they got worse in terms of their symptomatic response. There's times and places to say no, of course, because you rendered care, you rendered a service, and you should be paid for it. But there's also times and places to say and remove the emotion from the situation that, this $500 that they paid me is worth the investment to make them go away versus pushing them towards suing me, which is going to take a whole lot more time and energy away from my practice, away from, building my practice. And people have a really hard time understanding that.
yeah.
So that's where we come in and help them through it. But yeah, that was a really important point you made. And also that some of these complaints are actually made by the insurance companies. If they see you're billing in a erroneous way or a way that they don't like, they have the power to go to your licensing board and cause a fuss, just like a patient does. So we see oftentimes an insurance company is the source of the complaint, just like a patient could be. So
absolutely.
Really important points.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to realize when we're marketing our practice is when you run an ad for a significant discount for an initial first visit, patients are not the only people who read that ad.
Right.
And
your competitors, your medical doctor
think about
colleagues.
If you're billing insurance for, $295 for the first visit and you happen to be an investigator or auditor at Blue Cross Blue Shield and you see me running an ad for, $125 or $99 or whatever the number is, man, my day just got simpler because I know who to go audit and find
Exactly.
out. So what I think is important for the doctors as a takeaway from this is you really need to be transparent in your fees and your fee schedules and in your financial policies and how you explain those to patients. And of course, I mean, the core function of our company is the operation of a discount medical plan, which allows doctors to be able to charge insurance what they would like, what the fee schedule allows, but also to be able to keep care affordable for those patients
Right.
who do not have insurance. And you eliminate that potential risk of, audits, fines, penalties, and investigations just by taking a little time to make sure that you got that part of the practice right. Because like you said, nothing will piss off a patient more. I mean, you can save them from back surgery, but you let their bill be off by 50 cents and you go from what I call hero to heathen.
Exactly.
Just don't set yourself up for those types of problems. Make sure you've got that clarity, that transparency, that, and the other thing, I was just talking to someone else about this. One of the top reasons that patients leave a practice is over uncertainty.
Exactly.
Not sure when the care
and lack of trust.
Lack of trust. And part of that, lack of trust, I think, is built by that we weren't forthcoming in how their billing was going to happen, what their responsibility was going to be, how long care was going to, care might take. So, the
Right.
more transparent and upfront we can be about those things, I think that's a great way to mitigate our risk.
Yeah,
So,
and also just to hit the nail on the head with that, these are both, in my view and in most people's views, legal and ethical concerns. You have a legal requirement to disclose how your fees work. The board would tell you that, as you very well know. And more importantly, it's an ethical thing that, if you're not transparent, like you said, about how your office is functioning, how you're billing people, and it becomes unclear when there's a problem, that's just the source of everyone's frustration. And I mean, you can go to any profession, any industry, that is a problem. So you always want to be forthright, like you said, and make sure everything is clear from the get-go, and re-clarify as you go along if need be. Communication is a crucial measure that we talk about every time we go to a chiropractic college and speak to students, or to, just last week we were speaking at the joint national conference. Communication is one of our biggest focuses. If you're a good communicator and you're clear with your message and your finances and everything, then it's going to be rare that you have a problem, and people are going to appreciate that and like you. And people don't sue people they like.
A dear friend of mine and a key part of Cairo Health USA is like I said, my friend Aaron Reynolds.
Mhm.
And one of the things that he talks about is, as a provider, we have expectations of what the patient's responsibility is. But if you have expectation without agreement, you're
There's a
screwed.
disconnect. Yep.
Yeah. And so having patients acknowledge, in writing, what their responsibility is, or however you document that, I think is really, really critical, because you may have one thought about how it's going to go, but if the patient doesn't understand and agree to it, I think that opens you up for problems. So,
Sure.
in your experience in coaching chiropractors, what are some of the key areas that you see today's practitioners struggling with?
Yeah, there's two major ones that I'll say. Number one, we already talked about, is communication. There's a lack of great communication skills that are taught and learned in school, and unfortunately, from my experience, the newer generations, probably because everything's done via text, via social media these days, the verbal communication skills are hugely lacking. And so I talk almost exclusively to doctors about how to communicate effectively with patients. That's the number one thing that I deal with. Number two, which I think is interrelated, but is also a problem, is confidence. There's a huge lack of confidence, and I haven't really come to the core sources why. I work with a lot of the chiropractic colleges. There's not a whole lot, from my view, that's changed in the curriculum. There's some things that people point to, but there's also a lack of confidence in adjusting skills and clinical competency that I think is really harming people. And when you have a lack of confidence, if half my day is spent walking people off the ledge, proverbially, I'm a glorified psychologist in certain respects, because when something goes wrong, then, all hell breaks loose, in essence. Like, for instance, the biggest claim issue that we deal with is still the stroke issue. And as you probably know, all the research points to no causal link to chiropractic care and a stroke, or a dissection, more importantly. And, it's an unfortunate coincidence and association with the chiropractic profession, because these stroke-like symptoms result in neck pain, headache, numbness and tingling in your extremities, all of those things that people go to the chiropractor for. That's the problematic and coincidental association. So the point is, if a doc has a patient who happens to have a stroke after they went to their office, their initial inclination is, oh my gosh, I hurt this person, or I almost killed this person, or I did kill this person, worst case scenario. And it's very hard to walk that back once that happens, and they have in their mind that they did this, because they see the correlation as well, even though there's no causation.
Yeah.
So that, I would say, is the biggest linchpin in young practitioners is the confidence in their skill and their profession, that it is a safe profession, that their skills are important and they need to practice and hone their skills over time. That I'm not sure the best solution, but I would say those are the two core issues that I deal with 100% of the time in my ChiroSecure day to day is communication and confidence.
I had a colleague in our town that this had been many years ago, but he got sued by a patient, claimed malpractice. I think, whether it was a rib fracture, I don't recall the details of it. And what was interesting to see, Eric, was, when you get a malpractice claim, it's a legal issue.
Yep.
It's a financial issue, but oh my God, the biggest expense is the emotional part.
Yeah.
And I saw a guy who had a very thriving practice go from that to almost being timid, really, it shook him at his core.
Right.
And, I don't think there's anything worse than someone feeling like they're wrongly accused.
Yep.
And, I think we do have to just understand that you see a lot of patients over a long period of time. The likelihood of that happening, is, it's up there. Knock on wood. I never had one directly related to what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But, that emotional toll is unbelievable on doctors. And, that's why I think it's important to have the right team in place, like your malpractice carrier, and because they do have the expertise. This isn't their first time at the rodeo.
Yeah.
And, if you've never gone through that type of experience, seeing that happen to, who was a dear friend of mine, really opened my eyes to, the importance of surrounding yourself with the right resources and the right people.
100%. We like to pride ourselves on that. I take 90% of the calls that come in for these types of issues, and I joke about being a glorified therapist, but it does, I always appreciate when I'm at a conference or speaking engagement or whatever it may be, people come up and say, listen, you really helped me through that situation. And, I don't know if I'd still be practicing if we weren't with you. And that's awesome to hear, because you don't get that a lot. And so, that's what we really pride ourselves on with ChiroSecure. And, we want everyone to thrive in practice. We want everyone to be comfortable and confident and feel protected. So that's what we like to do.
Yeah. Rest well at night.
Exactly. Yeah.
that
100%.
mind is invaluable.
Yep.
So let's pivot a little bit and talk about Cairo Jobs and to become the leading employment platform for chiropractors. So it came out of your vision. So where did that vision or hallucination come from?
Yeah. Good explanation. So what I'll say is, over the roughly 13 years of doing ChiroSecure, one of the number one questions that I would get outside of risk management issues was always employment related. I'd get a call maybe once a week or once a month, depending on the year, from one of our doctors saying, listen, I know this isn't what you guys do, but I'm having a really hard time finding an associate, and I don't know where to look. And the answer historically has always been, it's not what we do, sorry, but check your state association, go to your alma mater, see what options are out there like it's the 80s and figure it out. That's the best I can tell you. And maybe I would say, 9 months to a year ago, I got that question 3 times in one day, and it pissed me off enough that I decided to do something about it. So, I mean, clearly there's a demand. There's been a huge inefficiency, I would say, in the chiropractic profession since its inception of finding, good associates and growing a practice. And, you see in technology, as technology builds, there's this process of what I call bundling and unbundling, where, you get these big companies who roll a lot of things up, a lot of services up. Think of something like Craigslist, for example. They have 1 million services you can do on Craigslist, and there's been several billion-dollar companies that have created one of those services as a standalone product to serve a certain community. So I see this happening now with groups like Indeed.com, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn. those are the behemoths in the employment arena. And that's what a lot of and most major chiropractic organizations use to recruit practitioners. And rightfully so, because that's where a lot of people spend their time. The problem is it is still like finding a needle in a haystack. You're combing through, hundreds, thousands of potential associates, and I hear most of them aren't even qualified for the position that people are putting out there. And we surveyed a lot of our doctors, and on average, believe it or not, the time it takes to find an associate through one of these services is roughly 6 to 9 months. And that's crazy to me. You're losing out on so much efficiency and revenue for your practice if you can't find somebody to come in for that period of time. That's crazy. And so the thought and the theory is, if we can create through Cairo Jobs a marketplace, an organization, a brand that supports the profession solely and can bring people together autonomously to find each other, that's going to be best for everybody. So this is the unbundling process I was talking about, where we're taking a concept like Indeed.com and pivoting it to the chiropractic profession. So if you're an employer, you go on ChiroJobs.com, you post your position that's available. You could search for doctors by technique. You could search for doctors by location. You could search for doctors by alma mater, by association. There's a million ways you can find adequate professionals and associates for your practice that you cannot do anywhere else. And that's where I think the problem really became an issue with a lot of these organizations. So our goal and our hope is that we're going to bring the entire profession together and make it a lot easier and a lot more efficient to build a practice. And if you're an associate or a student that's graduating, you're going to be able to find a much better position for yourself, because they're all going to be in one place and you have a menu to choose from. And that's also going to create a better economy of offerings for these associates, because I get to hear all the time that you got mom and pop shop out of Missouri that's offering a chiropractor out of school $45,000 a year to practice, which to me is insane and unsustainable when you're coming out of college with $250,000 in student loans. It's just not a possibility. So it's an important thing. I'm hoping we're going to be successful with it. And I think it's the right time. People have tried it in the past, but right now we're also experiencing what I view as a corporatization of the profession. There's a lot of private equity money coming in and rolling up different clinics and different groups. And that I see is actually a really healthy and good sign for the profession, that there's eyes on it. People want to grow it and make it more efficient. So we're here to support that.
As an aging chiropractor myself,
aging. You don't look more than 25?
Yeah, exactly. You might want to use your screen cleaner. One of the challenges is, and I get calls all the time. Our company gets calls all the time. We're not an employment agency, but they know we know a guy.
Exactly.
And I've heard a stat recently: for every chiropractic graduate, there's 4 to 5 job openings out there. And I think part of that is the aging of the profession. And certainly part of it is the evolution of the profession to where it is being run more like a business or a corporation. And so, as a doctor looking to hire someone, if you've been at it for 35 years and you're looking at trying to exit, what you thought was a lot of money back then when you started, when you're, sidebar, my mom passed away in 2020. My dad passed away in December. And so I've been in the process of digging through all of their stuff. And I found my mom's receipts for chiropractic college, which was $50 a month.
Oh boy.
And so if you have that mindset of, boy, that's what it was like when I graduated, if you think you're going to offer that, be able to recruit someone who's competent and going to stay with you, I think you need to think, I think you need to think a little bit differently. On the other side of that coin, though, I think sometimes there's an unrealistic expectation by recent graduates of, I don't know where they've heard what they've heard about. You come out your first year and you're at $150,000, $200,000 a year.
Right.
But so I think bridging that gap and helping people understand where the new graduates are coming from and what's important to them versus, I mean, I was an entrepreneur. I worked from 7 in the morning till 7 at night and on half day Saturdays.
Yep.
There are not people that want to do that anymore.
Right.
And so sometimes if you're trying to fill out your practice, it may take 2 doctors rather than 1 to cover the kind of hours that you're looking at. So we
100%.
don't always need to look through our own lens, but I think it's really interesting that you're trying to bring those 2 different perspectives together, find that common ground where they both make a great decision.
Yeah, spot on. So the latest stat I heard was actually 6-1. There's 6 open positions for every 1 associate, which, is a good thing for associates. That means you can demand a higher starting price, which is where that mindset comes from to a degree. I think it's also generational that, there's an expectation, unfortunately, of getting a lot for doing not that much. And that is definitely something I'm trying to reprogram in a lot of these students and graduates. And, frankly, on both sides of the coin, whether it's in an associate who's looking for the, to be given the whole world without much effort, or it's the employer who's looking to give pennies to an associate for doing a ton of work, I'm telling both of those sides that your expectations are misaligned and unrealistic. And if you don't change that, A, I'm not going to help you. I can't help you because, that's just not the market we're in. And B, you're going to be a dying breed. You're not going to make it in the profession long term if that's what your expectation is on both sides. Yeah. So I have no problem telling people that it's harder than I was expecting to bridge that gap. I was just expecting, as people do when they start new businesses, to have a rush of people on both sides saying, oh, this is great. But, it takes work, and it takes putting yourself out there and speaking on, shows like yours to really get the word out. But I think it's inevitable that, long term, these will get realigned. It's just the nature of business and professions growing. And I think hopefully a lot of these groups that are really going to be the leaders in the profession, whether you're talking about the Joints of the world or the Cairo ones or the health sources or whatever you're looking at, they need to hire fast. They need to bring on associates. And it's not the entrepreneurial path necessarily that the new students and graduates are taking, but it's a great opportunity, I think, to earn a healthy salary because they have to pay you one, and have a work-life balance where you're not working 60, 70, 80 hours a week to run a practice and do payroll and all of that, but also you're learning the ropes of how a successful business is run. Yep. And I think historically, when I started at ChiroSphere, what I would hear most often is students coming out of school, 70, 80% of them would believe and think they're starting their own clinic and they're going to make it big. And I would get to see a lot of those people fail, unfortunately. Yeah. That's shifting. And I think in a healthy way, where I'm hoping and I'm seeing a lot more people taking the associateship path. And I correlate that. I'm really into food and restaurants and cooking and that sort of thing. There's a concept in being a chef that is called stagging. It's a French term. I'm not sure the direct translation, but it's basically like a free intern. If you want to make it big, if you want to learn the ropes, if you want to learn from the best, then you ask these restaurants, the best restaurants in the world, to go stage at their restaurant for free. Basically, you're working just to learn from an expert.
It's an apprenticeship, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that this profession should have free labor like that, but the idea is I don't think you can learn to run a successful or big business unless you're in it and unless you take steps to see the inner workings of these groups. And so I think the only path for these new graduates is to take a great associateship, which hopefully you'll take one on ChiroJobs.com, and earn a healthy living to start paying off those loans. And then if you have that entrepreneurial itch and feel like you can make a dent in the profession, then do it after a few years. And I think you'll be well prepared to do it if you take that path.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things. And I'm enjoying watching the evolution of the profession, and I really think it is that. When I went into practice and when my mom and dad went into practice, I mean, the career path was you opened your practice, you worked your ass off,
Yeah.
and your exit strategy was a pine box.
Yeah.
That was pretty
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
it. But
And by the way, that was by necessity because it was a
yeah, yeah,
smaller profession.
yeah, no doubt. And what I enjoy watching other professions and how they do things.
Yeah.
There's a company here, GI Associates, that's
Mhm.
got like 120 GI docs. There's orthopedic groups that have got 50 ortho docs,
Right.
and and historically we've been islands as doctors, specifically in chiropractic. And there really is no way to really you can scale yourself up to a point, but there really hasn't been a well-defined career path for chiropractors. And I think particularly with the newer generations, what I wanted and what I was willing to do as an entrepreneur and starting out fresh,
Mhm.
and what students are coming out with, they have a completely different mindset. And so it's been refreshing to kind of see that, there are some alternative career paths, because it's no longer one size fits all. Every chiropractor
Exactly.
is an entrepreneur. So it's refreshing to kind of see some of those things develop for the profession.
Yeah, and I want to give you your kudos too because you like to be behind the scenes, but a lot of people I think should be aware of the things you're doing to help bring the profession forward. And one of my biggest frustrations with this profession, having now been in it for my entire life, because my dad's been,
Yeah.
heavily involved. So I've seen ebbs and flows, but I think the biggest problem that we as a profession face is the silos, like you talked about, the infighting, the disagreements, and there's no what I would view as a unified voice to bring the profession forward. And I think a lot of the efforts you're making now and today with a lot of the organizations you're involved with is in that vein, making that effort to unify the profession. So I definitely want to give you your kudos, and
Well,
I really appreciate that work.
that has been a passion project of ours. We were involved with the Cairo Congress
Yep.
and the Chiropractic Summit early on.
Yep.
And for those that aren't aware of the Chiropractic Strategic Plan, one of its core pillars is unity without uniformity.
Yep.
Whereas, historically it's been us against them, and like you said, the infighting and that type thing. And the reality is, we're all chiropractors. We probably have a lot more in common than we have in the way of differences.
Yep.
And, unfortunately, people tend to focus on the differences. It's almost like when your kid, they bring home 5 A's and 1 F.
Yep. You
Focus
focus on that F.
the F, the
Yep.
differences. So, hopefully that project, if you will, is been underway for almost 5 years now. Just some absolutely amazing things that are occurring there.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to mention, having graduated and come out of school and practicing with my folks for about 6 months, there were things that I knew that I had learned in school, and this was early 80s, even
Mhm.
back then. There were kind of some rules and regulations and things that my folks just really didn't
Care
care about,
about. Yeah.
and some financial policies and things that just, that's just how they rolled,
Yep.
without the perspective of, well, you're now involved in insurance, you're now involved with other healthcare providers, go on down the list.
Yeah.
And so I wrote an article a number of years ago called "The 5 Most Important Things You Should Know Before Starting or Joining a Practice." And one of the things, I just want to pass this along to especially the younger doctors. Like you mentioned, they've got $200,000+ invested in their degree, a significant part of their life invested in that.
Mhm.
You need to be damn careful about walking into a practice and just taking the job because it's available. You need to get out of your comfort zone sometimes and ask them, what are your billing practices? How do you document? What are your do you have a difference in what you're charging to insurance companies and what you're charging to cash patients? What are your financial policies? Because, as we talked about earlier, one of the biggest complaints to boards and ultimately malpractice claims is over financial issues. And
Yeah.
if you don't realize that when you see a patient and your name is on that claim form,
Mhm.
there may be an owner of the clinic, but guess who's liable? You are, and you don't want to put your license and your livelihood at risk because you weren't willing to ask those questions. And the last piece I'll say on that is, get a copy of that article. It's on our website. You can, all of the things are archived there, but take a look at that. And if you're interviewing with a practice, you need to understand that's one side of the interview. You also need to interview the owner and make sure it's a good fit for you and that you aren't putting yourself at risk. And I've had students that have read that article and said, well, they wouldn't answer it. What should I do? Run. There's a reason they don't want to answer
Right.
those questions. And you got to look out for yourself in those situations.
I love that. I'm going to add some additional context because, believe it or not, I get that question probably weekly from both associates and employers. So what I would caution associates and new grads on is coming across as the know-it-all, because I get that oftentimes, that they think they know everything about billing, they think they know everything about documentation, and they think they found some potential issue with the way a practice is operating, and they're going to get them for fraud, something like that, which makes me crazy. But what I tell these associates is, first and foremost, just like you said, it is your license on the line. So if you are uncomfortable or at minimum worried in some way, shape, or form, either you need to get clarity and have a sit down with the owner, like you said, and make sure you're on the same page, or you need to find a different practice because clearly it's not a good fit. And that's not going to work for anybody, whether they're right or wrong. It's more of that, social and ethical fit that is really important. And I agree 100% with your take that you need to go through your options, not just go with the first person that offers you a salary. You need to find the fit for you. And that's why this profession is unique. There's so many different techniques people practice, so many different ways people practice. And if you want to find your way, you need to find your fit and make sure that it's a good option for you. And then on the employer side, they like to be secretive about certain things. And I agree that's problematic too. But there is a balance. You can't have an associate going in and demanding everything, open your books for me so I can see so I can see everything.
That's under
So the point I'm making is there's always a balance, and don't be one of those people who either is completely secretive on the employer side or unreasonably demanding on the associate side. There is that ethical balance.
Good
so
point.
I just wanted to round that out.
Hang tight, everyone, while we take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back with you. Welcome back to our podcast with Eric Hoffman. I'm really enjoying this conversation, Eric.
Likewise.
Yeah. So clearly everything is advancing technology-wise. How do you see the future of chiropractic care evolving, and kind of what role how do you see risk management if you evolving in the future?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways we see the profession moving forward. First and foremost, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of these bigger groups grow and get acquired up through whether it's private equity or some investment vehicle throughout the future. So I think we'll see less and less independent groups. There will always be the selective or niche professionals, whether it's pediatric clinics or whether it's SOT clinics, whatever practice you want to do, there will always be that opportunity. But I think chiropractic as a whole will become more corporatized through groups like the Joint or the Cairo ones, the people I mentioned before. So that's number one. It's going to be much more of a corporate profession, which is good. Number two, I think from a risk management perspective, it's going to continue to get safer and more efficient because of point number one. When you have these bigger groups, naturally, there's going to be more oversight. There's going to be more effort to mitigate these types of legal situations, to better communicate with patients, whether you have an entire risk management group within these corporations, which a lot of them do, or you just have a better method of dealing with disgruntled patients. That's a good thing for us at ChiroSphere because we're going to see less claims as a result of that. So that's awesome. And then, for patients, the number one thing is it's going to grow the ability to access new patients. Like I was talking about earlier, I was speaking at the Joint Conference last week, and I forget the specific number. I'm sure somebody can correct in the comments, but I think it was they see 2.1 million patients a month within the joint world, which is crazy. Those numbers were not real 10, 15 years ago for one group or one company. So that's amazing. Say what you will about the joint, the model. I was not a big fan early on, but I've grown to appreciate what they've done and what they continue to do. And they're just opening access every single day to new patients to be presented chiropractic care. So that's the number one important thing to me, is the continued growth and expansion of chiropractic across the world to reach more people and more patients, and show them what a chiropractic lifestyle looks like.
Yeah,
So that's great.
I have heard for years, again, going back to my parents, that we want everyone to be under chiropractic care. Well, the ability to reach the world, or the planet, it's kind of hard for a single doctor to do.
Yeah.
It just, you got to have a huge marketing budget. I mean, let's face it.
It's hard to reach your own community as a single doctor, let alone the world.
No doubt about it. So I do see some benefits in scaling a practice to the point where, if it's your cup of tea that you want to associate or be bought out or work with a larger entity. I can't tell you how many times we talk to doctors, and they just had this conversation this past weekend. We had some folks over, and one of the comments was, "Man, I've been at this for 25 years. I only enjoy really seeing patients, and I hate having to do all that management stuff and all the billing and the coding. I just want to show up and take care of people." And sometimes it's as a solo practitioner, I've said this often, practice can be a ball and chain. I mean, I missed my kids growing up. I didn't get to go to events. I was, working all hours of the day and trying to build and grow my practice. So, I am pleased to see that there are now some alternative ways to enter the profession, have a great career, and, not experience some of the things that I experienced as a solo doc. As a matter of fact, when I hired the two associates that eventually purchased my practice, I told them, I said, my job is to make sure this is the best job you've ever had.
Exactly.
Like, wow, I've never heard that before. And I said, well, you got to understand that's selfish on my part.
Yeah.
Because it's the best job you ever had. You're going to show up. You're not going to leave me. I'm going to have congruency in my practice. I'm not always going to be looking for the next associate and creating that chaos around that. And so, I think having a model like that, I do think we are going to see more of it. And it is interesting how something like that can end up affecting mitigation of risk.
Yeah.
Because we do have systems and policies and procedures and, somebody looking over the shoulder, which isn't always a bad thing.
Yeah. And more importantly, with that, one thing that I didn't get to mention, which I see as a huge benefit, is when these groups get big, they accumulate and have a war chest of money, which is rare in this profession.
Yeah.
And with that money, you open up a lot of opportunities to lobby different governmental agencies, whether it's Medicare, whether it's, whatever other effort you want to make chiropractic care more accessible from a financial aspect, which has plagued this profession for years. And you're doing that with your company. There's a lot of efforts underway to do that, but I see that as a huge benefit as well of this corporatization effort, is just having more of a war chest at our profession's disposal to be able to lobby for us.
Yeah,
and
I hadn't even thought about that, but that is such a good point.
Yeah,
I mean, you truly, you go from a doc on the corner to an entity that can represent your interest and really have a huge impact.
Yeah.
So if I were today, I decided, I think I want to retire in 5 years or 2 years or whatever, what kind of lead time do you recommend that doctors, if they think that's on their horizon, or they think they just want to add an associate for whatever reasons, what kind of lead time do you think they need to plan for?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's no true answer. So I'll lean on historical norms with business in general. Usually, if you were to talk to an investment banker or a private equity firm, what they would tell you is if they're going to make an acquisition, usually they'll want to keep the owner on for at minimum 3 years. They'll do a 3-year earnout, meaning they don't want anything to break the day the transaction goes through. So that's number one. And also, it takes a long time to shift things over, not only from a business perspective, but even with your patient base. You're bringing in a new face. You need, that time to make your patients comfortable and get attached to this new doctor. That's not an overnight thing. But if you want your practice to be successful and have a great outcome from both the buyer and seller side, you need to have that time period to make sure that goes through. So I would say, on average, you should expect a 3-year window to make sure that everything goes positively for both sides to have a good outcome. That's my take on it.
I think, unfortunately, sometimes docs get to the end or toward the end of their career and they just want to toss them the keys.
Yeah, because they're tired.
Yeah. If you're going to do that, make sure that you're not financing the practice.
Exactly.
Because the likelihood
of success is low.
The exact same way that you had it is probably slim and none.
Agreed.
So if someone wants to learn more about ChiroSphere or Cairo Jobs, what's the best way to connect with you, Eric?
Yeah, Eric at ChiroSphere or Eric at ChiroJobs.com. Pretty easy, ERIC. Or just visit the websites, ChiroSphere.com, ChiroJobs.com. I like to make it stupidly simple for everyone to find us. So take a look. Always feel free to email me or reach out by phone. I'm happy to talk to anybody and everybody about it, the profession and any questions you have. So at the end of the day, we're here to support and grow the profession. That's our number one goal on both sides.
So I want to go ahead and talk to you about your next generation of Cairo Jobs. I know you're doing this for chiropractor to chiropractor.
Yeah.
But man, at the challenges that practices are facing today with hiring just staff.
Yes.
So hopefully the Cairo Jobs banner will begin to include,
yes,
looking for that next great
CAs, billers. Yeah. It's on the runway. We're going to nail chiropractors first and then expand.
So a couple for fun questions.
Yeah.
Who's your hero and why?
Great question. Business hero, I would say probably Jeff Bezos, just simply based.
Big.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fairly obvious and cop-out question or answer, I should say, but I've watched the growth of Amazon and I've listened to a ton of interviews that he's done, and I just resonate a lot with his ethos that the customer always comes first. And if you focus on making the customer's life easier or cheaper in any way, shape, or form, then the natural law of the world will mean your business is going to grow. So I take that ethos into ChiroSphere, Cairo Jobs, that number one is customer service. If we can help make your day better in some way, then we win. That's my idea. From personal or family, I would, certainly say my dad is a hero of mine. I work with him. I work alongside him. I've learned a lot from him. So, naturally that is an easy answer too, maybe another cop out, but I'm closest to him every day. So, I'm in this profession because of him and his efforts. So that's, I guess, my main answer.
Yeah, that's a good hero to have. He's a fine gentleman, and we appreciate him so much.
Yes.
What's a talent that you have that most people don't know about?
I don't like to always talk about my hobbies or talents, but I do have a few. I spend most of my time cooking, so I like to cook and bake and do different things. I had a job when I was 16 working at a nice restaurant in town, and one period of that job, several of our cooks got deported, and I was friends with one of the sous chefs at the time, and he asked, "Hey, do you want to try cooking? Because we need somebody." And so I spent a few months learning how to cook, and that was pretty instrumental in my life and my love for food. So I spent a lot of my time cooking. I also love music. I don't get to spend enough time playing music, but I grew up playing the drums. I play the guitar. I have a piano that I try to play. So those would be my two main skills and hobbies that I that I love.
Well, I have in the other room, I have 3 or 4 guitars hanging on the wall and
Nice.
a antique 1902 Kranich and Bach piano down in my living room. So
Wow.
I'm amazed at how many people in the chiropractic profession have some connection to music. It
Yeah.
just blows my mind. Well, thanks for spending some time with us today, Eric, and
It's been
thank
my
you
pleasure.
and thank everyone for listening to the ChiroSphere podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. Let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future or the topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll do our best to deliver. If you want to learn more about Chiro Health USA and how we can help you develop a compliant, profitable discount strategy that will absolutely grow your practice, income, and most importantly, profitability, call us at 888-719-9990 or visit our website at chusa.com, and that's how you spell Chusa, to find out why Chiro Health USA is the network that works for chiropractic in you. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you for having me.